Oh, I got to stop dancing when it comes back on. Hey, okay, all right, everybody, welcome
Nice.
to welcome to Irish Breakdown After Dark. It is Vince D'Addario along with Brian Driscoll, and we are here to talk about Notre Dame's win over Virginia. It is our Upon Further Review podcast, and Brian and I had a chance to break down the film, jump into the film, see if our initial thoughts were the same as our thoughts after watching the film. That's kind of what this is all about. Two coaches going back in, watching the film, and acting like we are going to be in there with the players and what we saw, the good, the bad, the ugly, right? So I would say overall, Brian, my opinion didn't change a whole lot, with just more specific opinion, I would say, from what we talked about last night after the game.
Yeah, there were some things that I thought were better than I thought they were live. There were some things that, maybe weren't quite as good as I thought they were live. But overall, it was the same performance. It was a good, strong performance by the defense. It was uh, a performance by the offense that at times made me really excited about the next several games if they can.
Yeah.
And the reason is I feel like they're so close to finally figuring it out, completely figuring it out. And from a coaching standpoint, it's frustrating, and that's where the frustration was coming out last night. But the other part of me as a coach is looking at it from the standpoint of, but they're so close. It's like, okay, now take that next step, right?
Right.
And the
Absolutely.
next 2 weeks, you play opponents that are pretty bad that can allow you to take that final step. And the reason that matters, even though it's like, well, it's a bad opponent, but that still matters because when you prove that you can do something, because Notre Dame hasn't had a complete game all year, nothing close to a complete game all year.
No, agreed.
They normally have at least one or two a year. They haven't had one yet. And it doesn't matter if it comes against a good team or a bad team, because once you do it, no matter who you play, you can then, as a coach, point to and say, hey, look, this is what we're capable of when we play our game. And so that's what they have to do these next 2 weeks. And we'll talk more about that afterwards, because we're going to kind of talk a little bit about the playoff and some of those things afterwards. But that was the thing from the offense. Look, you're close. You just got to figure some stuff out. You've got to do pedal to the metal. You've got to continue to get better with your run blocking. But man, there's some serious weapons for this team to work with, and Tommy Rees is starting to tap into that more and more and more. And we'll get into that a little bit as we dive specifically in the offense. But I thought overall, my feeling coming out of the game is just what it was last night. This was a good win over a quality Virginia team. Virginia was depleted. Notre Dame was depleted.
But that won't be the storyline. That's the problem.
Well,
for me.
because of who it was. I mean,
Right.
Isaiah Foskey being out is little different than, But then finish your point, Vince. I cut you off. Finish your point. Explain what's a problem for you, because I know we're going to go, and I think it's a really good point.
Yeah, the point is that Notre Dame is going to get. I don't think they're going to get enough credit for the win. And look, we were banging on Notre Dame for certain things, and rightfully so from a coach's perspective. But they're not going to get any credit because Brennan Armstrong wasn't in the game. And he is the face of this Virginia offense. He's the face of the team, right? That's why they showed him on the sidelines so many stinking times, right? Because it was a big deal that he wasn't playing. But nowhere, and I guarantee you, nowhere in game wraps or on the Tuesday night selection show, if they bring up Notre Dame and they'll talk about the Virginia game and they talk about, how it went down and everything, they will talk about the fact that Brennan Armstrong was not in the game. But they will not talk about the fact that Notre Dame was
about it at all.
Fair enough. But they will not talk about the fact that Notre Dame was missing 3 of their defensive captains. They won't talk. That will not come
their
up.
version of Brennan Armstrong for the defense,
right?
Kyle Hamilton,
and they might mention Kyle Hamilton, but they guarantee you they won't mention the middle linebacker and the starting defensive end.
They will say is, well, Notre Dame had X a number of time to prepare for not having Kyle Hamilton. Well, my argument would be is Virginia had 2 weeks to prepare for not having Brennan Armstrong. It's not like he was a game day scratch. Look, here's the thing about Drew White and Myron Tagovailoa-Mosa. They practiced all week.
Right.
I mean, this is a late in the week illness. I mean, they were – it's not like Notre Dame knew Tuesday that they weren't going to play.
Exactly.
They kind of had, as the week kind of got on and guys started getting healthy, but you never know who's going to take the turn for the worse when it comes to that kind of thing. So that was kind of what made it to me, a strong performance, but overall. But I just feel like they did what they needed to do. They got a 25-point win. It was not a perfect win by any stretch of the imagination. At times, it was a frustrating win, and it should have been about at least a 35 to 42-point win. But they
Right.
got the win. They got the win. And if you're going to have a game that's frustrating and all that, you at least want one side of the ball to step up
Right.
and shut it down. And that's kind of what hurt them against Toledo, against Florida State, is during the game, both sides of the ball had their moments of, what are you doing?
Right.
In this game, at least defensively, they were able to kind of shut them down for an entire game and allowed them to get a 25-point win, which looks so. Look, and talk about building a playoff resume. A 25-point win does not do for you what a 35 or 42-point win.
Agreed.
Especially a night when, the team right behind you, who now is in the driver's seat when it comes to the Big 12 championship, Oklahoma State, beat TCU by, 46, right? A TCU team that a week ago beat Baylor, who just went and beat Oklahoma and is going to be ranked in the top 15. So from that standpoint, it's a missed opportunity. But when you look at the resume as a whole, this is now Notre Dame's fourth straight double-digit win. That was the issue when we looked at early in the season. That they were just not pounding teams the way that they were supposed to pound teams. And anyone that watched the Wisconsin game is not going to credit Notre Dame with a 28-point win over the number 19 team in the country, right? Because they're going to say the way the game played out, it's not a 28-point win. Well, the last three games were convincing wins. Last four wins were convincing wins, games that Notre Dame led the entire game. I think Notre Dame trailed North Carolina for did they? No, they actually never trailed North Carolina, did they?
I do not believe they did, no.
So they haven't been trailing in a game since Virginia Tech, which was 5 games ago. So that part is good. But it's just about now with these final two teams just burying them. But diving into the film, Vince, let's start off with the offense. When you dove into the film, you and I both spent a lot of time looking at the offensive line.
Yeah.
Give me some of your takeaways from the performance of the line.
I'll tell you what, I was actually, and I agreed with you with your initial assessment from yesterday about them being good in pass protection. I thought Jack Cohn had, for the most part, all the time in the world. And when things started to close up on him, he actually did a good job of escaping and not taking a sack. He got out, he got a 2-yard gain on what could have been a sack, and then he escaped to the right and got out of bounds on another one. So I believe there were no sacks in the game, no official sacks. So, but he had time. He was able to step up in the pocket. The pass blocking I thought was good. I was impressed. It has progressively gotten better. But to be honest with you, to me, with Coach Quinn, it should be getting better. We've never really had an overall issue with pass blocking for Notre Dame lines. At least that's been the best thing that they've done
until this season.
Right. So
They were
I would expect
terrible
that.
The first few games.
But I would expect that part to get better because he's had good pass blocking lines in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the point I'm making. Run blocking, still hit or miss. I'm
nice.
I'm being somewhat kind. But when they hit, it's not bad. It's just there's too many misses. I
think, and it's something we kind of discussed beforehand, Vince. I think the bar has been set so low that
agreed.
The idea of hitting is different now than what it was last year or in previous years. In that there were times when the line, even like in 2019 when it wasn't a great offensive line, there were games like USC where they just came out and dominated and blew USC off the ball and ran for over 300 yards. And Tony Jones had a big night and it was great blocking as well as great running. Last night, to me, it's still just an example of the hits are simply they don't get beat, except for one exception. And there was one play that gave me hope that this line can, in fact, take that next step. And that was the 4th and 1 on the second drive of the game. It was the most, in my opinion, one of the 2 or 3 most physical runs we've seen all year. Physical blocking runs we've seen all year.
I would venture to use the D word. They were dominant on that play. On that play, they were dominant on that play.
Relative to what they've been.
Okay, fair enough.
Again, I think if we go back and look at go look at Kyron Williams' touchdown run against Clemson and there's different types of dominance. For this line, it was one of the more physical runs because you had nice kick out block by Kane Madden and Josh Lugg. You had a really nice block at the point of attack by Jared Patterson. He dominated on that rep. And then it allowed Kyron Williams to just kind of get through. I mean, it's one of the bigger holes you're going to see on a 4th and 1. And that was positive. And you could say, well, Virginia's D-line is not very good. They give up over 200 yards a game, which was honestly my first reaction. But at the same time, you can't control that. That's not not going to punish you because they suck if you do your job and do it well.
Right.
And they did that on that play. The problem is for too much of the night in the run game, there was just so much catching. And it just step and kind of catch. You step and you stalemate, step and stalemate. And the problem is in the first half, Virginia was flying off the ball. I mean, Virginia was competing up front, consistently beating them up. You had an outside zone on the first drive where Josh Lugg just gets beat outside and kind of turns, which made no sense on an outside zone play. Kane Madden gets beat. It's strange.
On run plays. I really don't understand.
It forces an immediate cutback.
The tackles give ground on run plays all the time, and clearly that's a coach thing.
Well, I always lines I've been on, we always taught to give ground on an outside zone, but it's give ground at bucket step. You still keep your shoulders square as you work out. What the tackles are doing, and it's not just Josh Lugg, is they kind of turn at a 45-degree angle. Well, once you do that on an outside zone, I mean, you saw Chris Tyree, it was a jet sweep. Chris Tyree's trying to go. He has to stop and kind of cut back inside. Well, then Kane Madden got beat outside. We had another run on an inside zone. It was, I believe, to Kyron Williams on a 3rd and 2. And Joe Alt and Kevin Austin both just get beat up. Kevin Austin, Michael Mayer both get beat off the line. Kyron has to spin out and get outside. It was, I mean, it's just, there was a lot of that last night.
Well, there were numerous occasions where Kyron Williams just made plays. I mean, and Logan Diggs too, for that matter. I mean, the Notre Dame backs again, and I will echo what we said last night. The Notre Dame backs make plays, and they are allowing the offensive line to be subpar. I mean, is that's a fair statement, right?
I think so. And for people that want to get mad and say, "Oh, we're being unfair," okay. So I want to give you a little stat from last night from the running backs. Okay. And here's an interesting thing. So Kyron Williams rushed for 70 yards. If you look at the Pro Football Focus numbers, and they're accurate, I went through and checked them. Of those 70 yards from Kyron Williams, 68 of them happened after contact. All but 2 of them happened after contact. Now, you have to consider that that's a little bit of a misleading number from the standpoint of if they're doing it the way that I believe they're doing it, they're counting it. If you have a 5-yard run, but you get hit 3 yards behind the line, that's 8 yards after contact.
8 yards after contact, sure.
So it's not like net, right? I mean, it's a little different, but it puts into perspective what I'm referring to. And of the 64 yards from Logan Diggs, 55 came after contact. And part of that is skewed because he had a nice jump cut at one point in time in the game where he ended up having one of his better gains and nobody touched him. But it was where they were kind of giving movement. But what I thought they did in the second and third quarter, better than they did in the first quarter, is they weren't getting beat off the line as much, meaning up the field off the line.
Right.
And that is when you started to see the run game get better and better and better.
Sure.
And it got back to the whole notion of, hey, when you just get a body on a body, you're going to be okay. But according to Pro Football Focus, and again, the one thing I think they do a good job of is data collection. And this is a data collection number. 199 of Notre Dame's 252 yards were after contact. Now, when you keep into consideration that 26, only 5 of Braden Lindsey's 31 yards were after contact. So there's a 53-yard difference. 26 of them came on a reverse.
Right.
So, it's just something to keep in mind. Pass pro wise, if you're looking to be critical, what I'd say is Virginia's not a very good pass rushing team.
Right, and we said that going into the game.
But they did exactly what you're supposed to do to a team that's not good rushing the quarterback. You gave your quarterback plenty of time to throw the ball.
Yep.
And
they
a couple
picked a
of
few
times,
things up too. That like there were times when Virginia was bringing some pressures that Notre Dame picked up.
Right.
I mean, there was one the one where Cone had to scramble for the 2 yards. Virginia actually brought 6, and Notre Dame had 5.
And the reason Notre Dame had 5 is because we talked about this last night. Chris Tyree was on a free release. Free release for a running back means I'm not blocking anybody. I'm just
correct.
So you brought more guys than you can handle. That is on the quarterback's got to know I got that guy.
Right. Exactly. So, I mean, they bring 6, you got 5. I mean, there's only so much you're going to be able to do.
But in the past, they've done that before. And the problem is one of those 5 got free.
Up. So there's 2 guys coming free.
Right. Last night, they got all the 5 they were supposed to account for. And the other thing I liked about what they did in Pass Pro last night is that was, I would argue this, Vince, and you tell me if you disagree with me. It was one of the more stout pass blocking performances I've seen, which was one of my concerns. Because even though Virginia's not a good pass blocking team, the thing that we did talk about that we're concerned about is Virginia's got big guys.
Yeah.
Are they going to get underneath the Notre Dame guys' pads and drive them into the backfield? I thought the tackles and the guards, especially, I thought this was probably Kane Madden's best pass blocking game of the season. His run blocking is still a hot mess for the most part, but this was his best pass pro game. This was, to me, Joe Alt was money. I thought he was just excellent on the backside. Josh Lugg was solid in pass pro. Jared Patterson was good in pass pro. Andrew Kristava got beat once up the field. Other than that, I thought he was pretty solid in pass pro. Got beat once and then kind of got beat late on another. But other than that, he was pretty good. And it allowed them to release their tight ends and the routes all night long. And that's the other thing that you have to consider is why is it important that the O-line be good in pass pro is because in the past, Notre Dame has felt the need to have to keep 6 and 7 guys into pass pro, meaning a back and a tight end or just a back or just a tight end. Last night was one of the most heavily involved game plans of 5 out. 5 out means every skill player that can run a route is running a route.
Yeah.
They did more of that last night than I thought they did when I was
They didn't keep a bunch of max protects and things like that.
There was one time, like I've said in the past, I feel like I can watch Notre Dame line up and say, okay, here's what's happening. Or at least I kind of know what that guy's going to do. There were times where they took Michael Mayer out in 11 personnel and put in George Takis. And I'm thinking, oh, they're doing that because they're going to have Michael Mayer, they're going to have Takis pass pro. They didn't.
Yeah.
They sent him out in a route. I was like, okay, all right. Like it was.
And we've been asking for that. I mean, that's
right. Now the ball never got to him because that's not where the read told him to go.
Correct.
Right. But I was as impressed by the pass blocking last night, not just the result, but how they got to that result, that they were physical against a team that is physical in their pass rush.
Right.
And Virginia threw some different looks not some different looks, but they did a lot more 4 down in the first half than we've seen, partly because Notre Dame wasn't spreading the field quite as much.
Right.
But Notre Dame was able to take advantage of that. Tommy Rees's game plan was allowed to take advantage of that because they said, okay, you're going to do 4 down, then we're going to do a lot of empty personnel. We're going to release guys because I think that our offensive line can block your guys. And I feel like as Tommy Rees has gotten more and more comfortable with the pass blocking, which again, first 5 games was like 2007 bad, right? Way better now. That's the one thing. And you can tell in Tommy Rees's play call, and he called several play action shots last night. He was calling, more free 5 out stuff last night.
Which means there was more trust.
Of an offensive coordinator that has more faith that his offensive line can protect and that his quarterback knows what to do with the ball in the instances where they don't.
I actually thought, or I think I should say, that Jack Cohn is playing with more confidence the last 3 or 4 games than he has all season. Like you can tell he's starting to
trust.
Since
the Florida State game.
Yeah, right. Because he was here, like he felt like he was here against Florida State, and then it dipped hard. And he wasn't trusting his eyes, he wasn't trusting the line, he wasn't trusting really anything, it felt like, right? And that's why there was all the debate about Cone versus Pine versus Buckner, all these different things. I feel like his confidence level is high now. I think he trusts the guys in front of him enough that he's going to stand in there and he's going to make plays, right? There's people in the chat that are giving Cone a hard time and that he's not good enough and all these different things. I think he's doing fine. Is he a 5-star quarterback who's just going to put the team on his shoulders? No, but I think we knew that coming in. He's going to distribute. He's going to get the ball to the people that need to get the ball. And I think he's doing a pretty darn good job of it. His completion percentage, his QB rating, all those things have been pretty darn good the last few games. So this offense is starting to take off, and it's partly because of the confidence of number 17, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so. But I think it's they go together.
Sure,
right?
absolutely. 100%.
Things go together.
Yeah, no question.
And so, yeah, I did not love what I saw from the run blocking last night. It still has to get better. But again, when you can be ticked about the rush blocking and they still go for over 250, that is a well-designed game.
Right.
And a line that for the most part just did what you're asking them to do. It's so obvious the way that Lance Taylor and Tommy Reese and Lance, I think especially, you can tell that they know. It's like this. Part of being a good coach is accepting who you are and coaching to that.
Correct.
And you see a lot of coaches that sit there and I see it on D1 every Saturday. D1 coach every Saturday. They keep trying to do stuff that their team just isn't good at doing. What we've seen from this Notre Dame coaching staff with Tommy Reese and from Lance Taylor is, look, our line's not going to turn into last year's group all of a sudden. It's not going to turn into what a lot of good running teams have. But what we can teach them to do is just get a body on a body. And if you go back and look at how they run the inside zone now compared to how they ran the inside zone a month ago or 2 months ago, it's a situation where they're telling them, hey, stay back, be patient, let the holes come, and then find a spot. And that's what they're doing. And it's coaching to who you are, not who you want to be. So those are the things that you look at and say, hey, that's good coaching. You're adapting. Right. You are, and then exactly. Tommy Reese's game plans have been built to that reality. That's something you have to commend them for, and that's something we saw last night. Because if they're still teaching the inside zone the way good running teams teach the inside zone, it'd still look a lot like it did early in the year. They're just running in the back of dudes.
Yep,
that's good coaching, and that's something I noticed even more last night. Like we've been seeing a lot of it, but I really started to it started to sink in last night to me that this is what they're doing. This is clearly what they're doing.
Right, no question about it. We have some super chats. You want to get to those right now? Get some of those put up?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm going to scroll back to the top. Here we go. AJ kicking it off. AJ, thank you very much for the super chat. And he did attach a question to it. He says, do you think Marcus Freeman will be a name to watch for the Washington job?
Mm-hmm.
I would say that if people are looking at coordinators, then yeah, his name should be involved. Now, is it realistic that he would go? No, I don't think it is. But if you're doing your due diligence as an athletic director, right, why would you not want to talk to Marcus Freeman? That would be my opinion on that.
This is what we're going to do, right? This is what's going to happen. And AJ, I get it. This is not a knock on you. This is an acceptance of reality. Every time a job comes open, we're going to get asked, do you think Marcus Freeman's going to take that job from now until he either leaves or becomes the head coach at Notre Dame?
Correct.
Okay. And they've had a lot of people asking, like, hey, did you guys drop a hint about who the next head coach is going to be? And I'm like, I didn't realize that was a secret. Like, I think a lot of us have felt for a while that Marcus Freeman was brought here with the thought of possibly being the next head coach.
Right.
So I didn't think that was necessarily like a
breaking news kind of thing.
Yeah. But I guess we said it with more certainty of, the head next head. And so
well, last night you used the words, I think the next head coach is on the staff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. But I kind of felt like that's a point we had already said. And it was Mark. Somebody asked me, do you think it's Tommy Reese? I'm like, what? No, it's Marcus Freeman. Like that's not a shot on Tommy Reese. It's like, but it's like we've talked about this before. But anyway, back to the point. The point is, I don't know if Marcus Freeman's going to leave. I think Marcus Freeman has pretty much committed to Brian Kelly that he's going to be here at least 2 years. That's what I was told.
Right.
Unless the perfect job comes open, and I don't
I'm
think
not sure
Ryan
what that
Day's
would.
leaving
Yes,
for
it's
the
going to be
NFL,
Ohio State. Yeah.
right? So, and I don't think Ohio State would go right to Marcus Freeman. I think there's some other coaches on staff who might have a crack at that, but I don't think he's just going to leave. I don't think. I mean, you look at his entire coaching career; it's been in the Midwest. And I don't think, I mean, because he's coached at what, Purdue? He's coached at Ohio State. I'm pulling up his resume now. He coached at Ohio State as a GA. He's coached at Kent State, it's in Ohio.
That's the one I
Purdue, it's in
forgot.
Indiana. Cincinnati in Ohio. Notre Dame in Indiana.
Right.
And not wanting to go all the way to Louisiana was one of the because of his family and where his family is and his wife's family. Because him and his wife grew up in the same sort of somewhat area, right?
Weren't they? Isn't he from Chicago?
No, they're both from Ohio.
Ohio? Okay.
Yeah, he's from Dayton, and his wife, I believe, is from
right.
the Cleveland area. So that's not that far away.
Right.
So, they've got 6 kids. Family's able to be around. Both sides of the family able to be around. That's one of the factors that went into him not taking the LSU job.
Sure.
Well, Louisiana's a lot closer than Seattle. So that's one of the reasons I don't think he is. But look, I have no problem people asking this, but I just don't see Marcus Freeman taking any of the jobs that are open. Now, maybe he might consider Penn State if James Franklin leaves. I think that would be one he might consider. But I don't see Washington hiring a guy who's a defensive coordinator, never been a head coach, after they just fired a guy who was a defensive coordinator, never been head coach after 13 games. Now, his firing had more to do with what happened when he, hit a player last week and then shoved the player in the back. But if he was in his last 13 games 11-2,
yeah,
he didn't get fired. They fired him because he's doing a terrible job. Right.
And then they had a cause.
Now they have have cause now.
Right.
So anyway, that's kind of what I was going to say. I did want to say one other thing about the offense before we move on to the super chats, because then after the super chats, we're going to go to the defense.
Please do.
One thing I've noticed is they're getting super dependent on RPOs being outside cuts. And it's making it easier for teams to get their hands up and bat those down. It's also going to eventually result in somebody stepping in front of them. They've got to mix up their RPOs with some ins, some glants, some slants, some things like that. They're going to have to start adding that a little bit to what they're doing so teams just aren't sitting on that stuff. And eventually it's going to cost you. Just needs to be a little bit more creative with your RPO game.
We were not an extensive RPO team, but when we were putting in RPOs as a high school team, it was those in cuts that we put in first, because those are easier throws for my quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Is that just, so I'm throwing it back to you. Is that a normal progression, or does it just depend on what your offense looks like?
I think it depends on what you want and who you're trying to read off of. I mean, that's the other thing too, is who are you reading?
Yeah.
If you're reading the safety, that may be a different thing than if you're reading an inside backer or an overhang guy. I mean, part of that is who you're reading. But I've always felt that RPOs need to be a mixture of both, because the problem that you can run into when your RPOs are too much in breaking is you run the risk of your quarterback reading this safety and locking in. So if I'm reading over here, right, and I got a guy coming from here, what I'm not seeing is that safety coming from over there.
Yeah.
So you've got to be careful there too. You can't be too dependent on one or the other. And part of it is just the game plan, who you're playing that week, how they're playing you. If they're constantly playing you inside out, then a lot of your stuff's going to be out breaking or stop routes. If they're playing you sort of off, or if they're playing you sort of on the outside, then you may do more in breaking stuff. But I think they need to need to develop more variety to what they do off the RPOs. That'd be something that I would like to see them add. But
fair enough.
But that's sort of a criticism of what I felt was otherwise a really good game plan by Tom Maurice last night.
Spark, thanks for the super chat. Sorry I missed the post-game show last night because my scotch intake increased after 1:16 second quarter from offensive performance frustration, defense great.
Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic.
I have a feeling that you were not necessarily alone on that.
Yeah, no doubt. Another super chat here from Hulk Strongest. Great name, by the way. Thank you for the super chat. Love the show, and your guys' analysis is pretty on point. But I always wanted to ask this. Is this considered West Coast or run and shoot?
Is what you're talking about the Notre Dame offense?
Notre Dame's offense. Yeah.
Neither.
Yeah.
It's neither. It's the West Coast is in run and shoot are they have some things in common, but they're really different. A West Coast offense is probably closer to what Notre Dame does, but it's not a West Coast offense. It's just more of sort of like a traditional pro style. I mean, it's a lot of vertical. I mean, the West Coast is everything. It's timing. It's hit on time. There's certain concepts. It's the Y banana. David Shaw runs it. Jim Harbaugh runs it. Every West Coast coach runs it. Notre Dame isn't a West Coast team. A run and shoot team is, and that's the stuff Warren Moon used to run. Perhaps he's referring to air raid, because I don't know of anyone that runs really the run and shoot the way it used to be ran anymore. Some of the air raid teams are probably distant cousins to the run and shoot, right? But actually, I think they are cousins to the run and shoot. The Jack Pardee run and shoot that we saw back at Houston back in the day with Andre Ware and David Klingler and that group before he went to the Oilers and took the run and shoot to the Oilers, if you remember that, with Warren Moon. But this isn't really that, either one of those. This is more of a modern, I think Tommy Rees really kind of, views himself in a Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan type. So if I were to say his offense has a cousin or a relative, it'd be more like the West Coast, but not really, because Kyle Shanahan's version of the West Coast looks a whole lot different than the original West Coast, like the one his dad ran. There's still some principles that are the same, but it's changed a lot over the years, as it always does.
Right.
Good question.
Jacob Staley. Yeah, it was a really good question. Hulk strongest. Thank you for the super chat, Jacob. He says, I know we are focused on style points for the committee, but these are the games where we should get our backups playing time. That has always been an issue. I will push back on that a little bit, because I thought they got a lot of guys in this game.
A ton.
And, the backups.
I kind of feel like he's saying he's agreeing with you, Vince.
Oh.
Well, I could be wrong, but I feel like he says, I know we're focused on style points for the committee, but these are the games that we should get our backups PT.
That's the case. Then
been an issue.
I agree with you.
I feel like he's saying that's a positive for me.
Yeah, they had almost their entire backup defense in halfway through the fourth quarter. So
they
got
were getting some
series.
I remember seeing Prince Colley in the third quarter.
He made a great tackle at one point in the third quarter. And offensively, I mean, good Lord, they can't go any much deeper than they already have. Mm-hmm. I mean, except unless you're talking about the offensive line, but they can't get any deeper skill-wise because there's really nobody left. So, but yeah, I thought they did a pretty good job of that actually last night in a game where it was never in doubt, but it wasn't necessarily a blowout either, right? I mean, I think we can all agree on that. So, yeah. All right. Josh Phillips. Thank you, Josh, for the super chat. I'd rather watch your show than the NFL on Sundays.
Me too.
You're a good man, Josh. You're a good man.
I've maybe watched 5 plays in the NFL. I remember when Denver started off like 3-0. I was like, you should watch the Broncos. And I'm like, yeah, just give me a couple weeks. And it's funny because Darren Pritchard of WSBT, Vince, who you and I both work with, he's also a Broncos fan, and we'll talk about it. And last week, Denver beat the Cowboys, who were supposedly really good. And I said, you know what this means, right? And he's like, I have no idea. I said, this means they're going to lose to the Eagles next week, who stink.
Guess what? No. And the Cowboys absolutely
destroyed Atlanta.
Oh, like, my goodness gracious. Yeah. That was embarrassing.
I did see I do look at box scores. I just don't.
That was embarrassing.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what I do too, but because I just don't have time. But anyway, Tommy Guns is jumping in, and he says, I love y'all, but this is my one night at home with the kiddos. I'll watch tomorrow. Take it easy, y'all. I may be back from time to time. Tommy, believe me, Irish Breakdown is built on family first.
Yes.
So you do you, man. It'll always be there for you to watch. Don't worry about that. And can I just throw this up here just because I want to? Jacob says,
come on.
It was there. I mean, it was right under it. It was right there.
Just leave it there. It doesn't need to be vocalized.
I'll just let it marinate.
We'll let our work speak for itself.
It was there. It wasn't my opinion. It was just something.
We'll let our work speak for itself.
All right. Let's see.
And
here.
I think it does. I think Jacob's got the next one. It's down there a little bit. Bless you.
Thank you.
You got one from Jacob. So if you, Vince, I'm gonna pull this one up. If you see one before this, if you want to look, I'll read this one. If you want to look and see if there's any before that. Jacob asks, in all honesty, is Jeff Quinn the O-line position coach next year? If your answer is yes, what is to happen this year for you to feel he won't be? I don't see any reason why he would leave, because I don't think Brian Kelly's going to force him out. I think Brian Kelly's going to look at the stats from the second half of the season. He's going to look at the numbers they've put up against, let's be honest, we said it before this part of the schedule hit. These are bad defenses. And you got to make sure that you don't allow your success against bad defenses to cloud what has been your performance all season. Brian Kelly said that his team is playing the best football season, and they are.
Yeah.
But it helps that offensively that they're playing bad defenses, but they continue to score under what most of these teams are giving up. I mean, Virginia came into this game giving up 34.6 points per game against Power 5 or against FBS football teams. Right. And Notre Dame scored 28. That's almost a touchdown below. They scored, they ended up scoring above what Carolina gives up, and they scored under what USC had been giving up for most of the year. So, I mean, this is what you're supposed to do, but that's not how Brian Kelly's going to look at it. And he's going to look at hopefully a strong finish on the recruiting trail, which I think they're going to do. And that's going to be his justification for keeping Coach Quinn. So, that's why I don't spend a whole lot of time unless you guys ask about who the next O-line coach is going to be, because I'm not going to waste any time talking about who the next offensive line coach should be when I have my doubts about whether or not Brian Kelly is going to make a change.
There's no opening, and I don't foresee one coming.
Yeah.
Regardless of what we've heard or from other outlets, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that being the case. I will be shocked. Good shocked, but shocked nonetheless. As I was, there were no super chats above this, but I was scrolling around and I did find this one comical, just because it gave me the mental picture of this going down. Ed says, I can see Reese now licking the tip of his pencil and writing down, more variety, RPOs, include slant. The visual in my head was just fantastic.
Okay, so what is he? I wonder if he's going to get us some more here. Okay, so what do you run some glance routes? Yeah, go back and watch the Bama film from last year, and you can see what they did.
That was fantastic.
Really
I appreciated that.
I can assure you that Coach Reese is not wasting his time.
I can assure you that as well, but
he was so
funny to me.
But he's not.
Yeah. Jacob Staley, another super.
Although I'm going to say something.
Oh, go ahead.
I don't think he watches the show, but sometimes I wonder if someone does.
And that has his ear.
Or maybe he and I have a lot more in common than he and I realize, because I looked at my keys to the game and I'm like, yep, that's pretty much what they did. But I didn't put those up till Saturday.
Right. Game plan was in.
Right. And then it's like, we talked about what they need, and it's like eventually. So I don't think it's not that they watch the show. It's just that when Tommy Reese is being who Tommy Reese is, I think he and I have a lot more in common offensively and schematically than maybe he would like to admit, or I would like to admit, because they eventually get to where I want them to be. It just, it sometimes it takes a little bit of time. So that's part of the reason that I'm a little bit more forgiving of Coach Reese and patient with Coach Reese as he learns on the job, because it's not his fault that Brian Kelly hired him at 28. What's he going to do? No, Coach, I'm good. I'm good. Why don't you go hire Joe Moorhead? No, he's going to say, yeah, I can do this. Just like every confident 27, 28-year-old would have done, just like I would have done when I was that age. I was interviewing for OC jobs when I was 25. I thought he could do it. I'm glad that the places I interviewed, I was like, I don't know if I had the seasoning or if I would have had the coaching staff around me to help.
Right.
To be as good as I could have been. But I can't fault him for that. I mean, I don't know what you expect him to do. What I'll say is, I think that as he has some struggles and failures, that he eventually evolves and kind of realizes, okay, we've got to get here. I think if you put a better group around him, I think that'll continue to help and help and help. I don't see that. I don't see there really being any changes this offseason.
Okay. We haven't talked about this one. Jacob Staley with the super chat. Thanks, Jacob. And he says, special announcement. I'm all in and glad to help. So go ahead.
I'm going to make that note, so that way, in case Jacob's not on the show on Wednesday, we will account for that as being part of.
Oh, nice.
A part of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you don't know what our special announcement is, on Wednesday we are doing our mailbag
starting at 12:30
instead of on Friday. We're going to do it on Wednesday. And at 12:30, like our normal time, and all the super chats, every nickel, every penny, every dime
that we get.
Yes, correct.
We're not taking from Google's cut.
YouTube takes a cut, right?
Yeah.
So whatever comes to us, we are going to pool it up, and then we are going to donate it to local.
Well, we're gonna use that money to go out and buy goods.
Yeah.
That we're going to give to local homeless shelters and faith mission shelters and some places like that. We'll tell everybody on Wednesday where it's going, so that way you all know where it's going.
Full transparency.
But we are not going to just give them money, because we want to make sure that it's actually going to the people that have the need, not the overall budget, which sometimes can be spent on other things. But this way we can at least say we know exactly where the money is going. And I feel like that's the best way to be a steward of all of your money and mine, because we're going to give as well. But we just felt that would be the best way to be stewards of the resources that you all are willing to give. So yeah, that's what we're doing. So that'll be Wednesday at 12:30.
Yes.
We are probably, my wife is working on creating a link if you don't want to give in a super chat, or if you want to give more anonymously, because some people like to give anonymously. We are working on creating a page where, like, kind of like when you go join Irish Breakdown, where you can give PayPal, you can Venmo, or you can use a credit card if you want, to where you can donate that way. And then obviously we would get all the proceeds. We wouldn't be sharing that cut with anybody.
Right.
And that would then, of course, all go. And
it'll be a time frame thing. We'll give until X amount time to do that through that website.
And we will post what our final numbers are. So we'll take a screenshot of what YouTube so YouTube, usually about 24 to 48 hours after show,
right,
they'll tell us what we made, and from super chats, and we'll take a screenshot of that, and I'll take a screenshot of what our totals are as far as the donation, so that way everybody knows how much we raised. And then when we spend the money, we will then take a screenshot of our receipts to make sure that everybody sees that, because we want to make sure you all know with full transparency where that money is going. So anyway, back to Notre Dame football.
Absolutely. Okay. Here we go. JKR Myers, thank you for the super chat. Now that we're 10 games in, was Cohn the right decision over Pine as the starter? Yes. I fully support the decision that they made. I'm very happy with the way Cohn is playing right now. He's playing with confidence. He's getting the ball to what we are clearly seeing are talented people around him, right? And they are also figuring out offensively, like we've said, of ways to make this offense click with the guys that they have. I mean, I think he is the right decision.
I'd still like to see a few more deep shots, but overall, I'm pleased with the direction they're going. And then he needs to hit some of those deep shots. I mean, he missed a couple opportunities. Although the way that the coaching staff was yelling at Lorenzo Styles after the one he missed on Saturday, it looked like they felt Lorenzo bent that route too far in instead of
should have been
over
more
top.
of a deep. Yeah, because if he did,
where Cohn threw it, because Lorenzo's going here and Cohn threw it there.
Right.
And the way that people were reacting. And the way that Cohn reacted after the interception, you could tell he was not happy with Kevin Austin.
No doubt about it.
Because, as I said, at first Kevin Austin was over top of the guy, and then when the guy hit him, Kevin slowed down, went underneath him. You cannot do that mid-route. And that's about as emotional and expressive as you're going to see Jack Cohn get. Like he went like this. That's the equivalent of Dan Marino MFing a dude like he used, you know what I mean? Like Marino just get, that's Jack Cohn's version of
pretty much
is the version of like Dan Marino or Peyton Manning just lighting one of his receivers.
I thought both of those balls were well placed, and it was the receiver.
I thought the first one was a little long, even if Lorenzo would have ran it correctly. I think that's probably a little long. The second one to Austin, he's got to stay over top, and if he does, he's got a chance to make that play. Because he would have been where the corner was, who outplayed him for the ball. That's where Austin is supposed to be.
Yes, no question. Jacob Staley he put this in as a super chat and with a winky face, and so I'm sure I'm going to get in trouble. But there it is.
Why y'all trying to start stuff?
Starting trouble. Paul McConnell with the super chat. Thank you, Paul. And I will say thank you, Jacob, for the super chat. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Is our best chance to beat Georgia, Alabama with 17 and a small mix of 12, or by using the last two games to get 12 fully ready? I love 17, but Virginia and Navy ain't Georgia.
17. I mean, look, Jack Cohn is their best quarterback.
Yes.
Now, would I say, here's the other thing, too, you got to think about. What's Georgia's strength? Running the football, like stopping the run. They're a very good run defense.
Yes.
Where they are vulnerable.
You stunt the growth of Tyler Buckner if he has to play with the package.
Look at the decision Florida made. They put their one-dimensional young redshirt freshman quarterback in, and he got annihilated. And who knows what his confidence is going to be after.
Exactly.
I mean, the only way to beat Georgia is to beat them throwing the football. Now, you can't just be a rushing team, but Georgia's given up 78 yards per game on the ground and 2.5 yards per carry, and Notre Dame has yet to run the football worth anything against a team that's got a good defense, much less Georgia's defense. Now, do I think that you can then use Cohen as a wrinkle to get Georgia to chase? Yes, but that's not the way you want to go full time. This is still and will always be a team that is at its best when the offense is geared around Jack Cohn and Jack Cohn's playing well. It is. So, look, Paul, it's a very fair question. I mean, it's a very fair question because Tyler is the dynamic player. He's that dynamic player that in theory could give Georgia fits, but he's just not that guy in 2021. He's not going to be there yet because he can't run the entirety of the offense yet. Next year against Ohio State and those kind of teams, I'm looking forward to seeing what Tyler Buckner can do. But right now, this is still has to be, in my opinion, Jack Cohn's team. And I think the last few games have kind of told us that. I think he's going to need to play still even better against those teams. Like how he's played the last couple of games is helped you beat Virginia and Navy and North Carolina and USC. But you got to play better than that to beat Georgia. So, but he's the one I think that's capable of getting to that point, in my opinion, with this offense. So that's how I see it. But again, it's a very fair question, but it's just not. And I think the other thing too is Jack's still kind of getting on the same page because just when he started getting kind of comfortable with some of those other weapons, now all of a sudden, Wilkins is hurt, Neighbor Davis is hurt, and now all of a sudden he's playing with Lorenzo Styles and Deion Colsey and some of those guys. And Jaden Thomas got in last night, had a really good block on a 3rd and 2 that was converted despite the fact Kyron Williams got hit 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage twice.
Yes.
Twice.
Yes, absolutely correct.
He's so freaking good.
That touchdown run, his first touchdown run was unbelievable. I mean, again, he has at least I feel like he has one of those a game.
At least.
Yeah.
Vince, it's kind of wild. Like he was so good live, but it's like I enjoyed watching him run even more on the rewatch because you're like, wow.
Yeah.
How was that positive?
Absolutely.
Like even his first run of the game that went for 4 yards, he got hit like 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage. It's like it should have been a -4 and he turns it into a 4-yard gain. It's just like the kid is playing at such an incredibly high level right now. It's just it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Yep. That's all for Super Chats, Brian.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the defense, Vince, before we dive into your thoughts on what you saw, some of the new things that you saw from the defense from this performance once you dove into the film.
Well, we kind of touched on it last night, but watching it back, I really felt like the defense was playing with a confidence that I have not seen them play with as of yet. They were, which led to aggressive play. Which led to team ball. I mean, they rallied to the football very well. There were a few things that I didn't like. I still feel like in space, like the DBs or whoever's out in space, still having a little trouble getting off some of those open field blocks.
Definitely.
That's a problem for me yet because teams will take advantage of that, right? Just get the ball to the outside and push Notre Dame down the field. They need to do a better job of that. I thought that the open field tackling once they were able to have open field tackling, I thought they actually did a very good job of that. So and then I will also say, because of the Ramon Henderson change to safety, I did watch him a lot closer in this game. Mm-hmm. I think that they hit that out of the park. I mean, It's one game, and I will temper myself with that. It is one game, but he played the field safety position pretty darn. The ground that he covered on that interception was impressive because he started out on that play outside the far hash and he made that interception on the other sideline. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So you watched it because remember I said last night about how much ground he covered because you weren't looking at him on that play. You saw what I was talking about, right?
I didn't think he would be able to cover that.
It wasn't what Hamilton did against Florida State, but it was pretty close.
It was pretty darn close.
It was pretty close.
Seriously. It was impressive. And I thought that he did well in coverage. I thought he came down and supported the run pretty darn well. And they had him playing center field an awful lot because they were bringing DJ Brown down closer to the line of scrimmage at times. I really hope that this is a change that they're going to stick with. I don't know. Look, he didn't give them any reason to put him back at corner. I think that this is a great move. And if they keep him there, he's going to challenge for a starting spot next year. And I'm less worried about the safety position next year than I was.
If they stick with this and they can build on it, because I've never been impressed with Ramon Henderson as a corner. He always looked lost.
100%
a friend of mine
agree.
made a great point to me today. He's saying he was not saying that the Notre Dame coaches are doing anything that reminded him of what Brian Van Gorder. He was making the point that Ramon Henderson plays corner like the guys did under Van Gorder, where they just look lost and overwhelmed and not sure of what to do.
Yeah.
And then when you move him to safety, he looks like a guy that's being coached by Marcus Freeman and Mike Elko and Clark Lee, right? Where confident, knew what to do, flying hard, playing hard. I didn't realize this. I thought what Virginia was doing on the play that he blew up on that blitz, I thought they were running one of those pitch reads where the quarterback then goes. They were running a sprint draw. He beat them to a sprint draw.
Yes.
Like that is not – I don't know if I've ever seen that. Like to where he got – but like I've seen it where a guy blitzes and he gets there the same time that the running back and the quarterback are handing off. I've never seen a guy beat the quarterback to the running back, or beat the running back to the quarterback. It was a great play call. I thought Marcus Freeman's use of the safeties was excellent. Very diverse and multiple.
Yeah.
I'm going to disagree with you on one thing.
Okay.
I don't think this was a level of confidence that we haven't seen. I think this was a carryover of the confidence they showed last week against Navy.
Okay, I see what you're saying there. I would say that from the Navy game, confidence can carry over.
Yes.
And I almost feel like in my head, I dismissed the Navy game a little bit just because it's so different than what they normally play.
Right, scheme-wise.
But I agree with you from a confidence standpoint, that did carry over. In my head, I erased the Navy game. Like,
because here's the thing that I said last week, and because Mike Hutton, our beat writer, wrote an article where he quoted Jack Kaiser after the game about how they want to carry over what they did against Navy into Virginia. And people are like, well, you can't do that because that's a triple option. And it's like, that's not what he was talking about.
Yeah.
He was talking about the way they prepared, being assignment correct, flying hard to the ball, and just doing your job and doing it hard. That carries over whether it's no matter what kind of offense you're playing. And that's what we saw. It's like, yes, the scheme was different. Guys were lining up at different places. But it was the same principle of do your job, be accountable, and do it hard and fast. And that's what I thought they did last night. And that was the impressive part of what Notre Dame did defensively. And they mixed up their coverages a lot. Like there was one play, we talked about how they did like a lot of quarters to the field and like cover 2 to the boundary. One time on a third down, they lined up just like that. But at the snap, the free safety went right to the middle. The backside safety came right underneath and the linebacker went over. Like, it's like, I have no clue what they're doing, but it worked because they got to all the zones.
Yes.
I'd never really seen anything like that.
Yes.
But they got where they needed to get to, and they did it quickly. And Virginia was like, I don't know what's there.
And I want to say that was Jordan Botelho that was dropping on that particular play.
He was dropping to away from, but it was DJ. It was DJ Brown that was coming from the backside, and then Botelho was running away from him.
It was like a chorus line, like they all just like it was all in sync.
It's like I have not seen them run that coverage. I don't remember them ever doing it. If they have done it, it has been infrequent. And they ran it with confidence. And that was the other thing. Jordan Patel was playing rover. He was playing rover in this game.
You're right.
Which I was like, what? And he looked comfortable doing it, which adds to what we had talked about before, why he brings an element to the Viper that would fit really well with what Marcus Freeman's trying to do. So anyway, I thought defensively there were some things there for Virginia to take advantage of that they didn't take advantage of. And that would be they were playing really off to the field. The nickel a lot of times and the field corner. And Cam Hart was opening his hip. So usually when you teach a corner is, you pedal until he threatens you. Once he threatens you, then you open your hips to run. Well, last night Cam was opening to run when guys were like 4 or 5 yards away from him. And that's why the couple times they beat him, they were doing it. They should have gone back to that a lot more. There was also a couple times where they beat a nickel or a safety on like an 8-yard out cut because Notre Dame was just playing off. Notre Dame was basically giving them that, right? And
exactly.
So but Virginia didn't take advantage because partly I think the freshman quarterback was so confused as to what they were going to do post snap. He just locked in on a guy and was like, "I'm going to throw it to that guy." He wasn't even looking outside on some of those. Now, would Brennan Armstrong have hit some of those? I don't know if Notre Dame would have done those things at Brennan Armstrong. I don't know what the game plan would have looked like.
Yeah.
The other thing I noticed is again, stats can be a tad misleading. Notre Dame had 7 sacks yesterday. I didn't think the pass rush was great. There was a lot of times on first and second down where the pass rush just was getting there or getting there late. Even on a couple of those sacks, they were late sacks. They were covered sacks. But I'll say this about the pass rush. It was money. Meaning they made plays when they mattered.
When it mattered, yeah.
And so red zone defense has been great all year. 2 sacks continued in this game or what kept that going.
Took them out of field goal range.
Yeah, both. One time it took them into – they had the ball at the 20, and they ended up having to attempt a 44-yard field goal that they missed.
That they missed, correct.
Another time they got to the 13, got driven back because of a sack and kicked the field goal and made it, but it was a much longer field goal. They had 5 of their 7 sacks were either third or fourth down sacks. That's look, if you're going to make those plays then, right? And that played a big role in why they were able to get Virginia off the field. And to do it against a pretty mobile athletic quarterback. So I thought the contain for the most part was better than it had been. There was a couple times, but look, mobile quarterbacks are going to get free sometimes. You're not going to hold a mobile quarterback to -5 yards rushing.
Right, exactly.
He's going to get some yards, but they were able to contain it for the most part, in my opinion. And there was a couple times, had a guy up the seams that they didn't cover right away, but they were limited. I mean, those things are going to happen. They were limited. They were not big deals. Guys were recovered quickly. I thought it was a really sound game plan, a game plan was executed really well. And they took advantage of the fact that Virginia was not 100%. And again, you can't control that. All you can control is what you do. And they did exactly what you're supposed to a team that has a freshman quarterback.
Right.
But the thing about it is it wasn't just that. That this was still a very talented group of receivers, and they were on them all night. Oh, Clarence Lewis had I thought, for me, that was one of the best games Clarence has had. And we've said, look, he's got to step up. He's got to play better. He was in my what to look for. I said, look, he's going to have to step up and play well in this game. And he did. We've been hammering him. So it was nice to see in a game where you're missing 3 starters. You can't just count on the guys stepping in for the starters. You need your other starters to step up too. And we saw that last night. Clarence Lewis stepped up and played well. I thought Kurt Hinish had a good football game. Jason Adamiola, despite battling the flu, had a good football game. So you saw a lot. Tariq Bracy had a solid game, and then you saw Bo Bauer play great, and Ramon Henderson. I thought all the safeties played really well, and so I thought that I didn't think Houston Griffith started last night. He did start last night. He actually played a little better than I thought. He just doesn't make plays, but he was in place last night. He was where he needed to be last night. He contributed to the overall safety group that played really well. He didn't make as many plays as the other guys, but he also didn't get beat. Yeah. And that was all part. I mean, I thought all the safety and huge kudos to Chris O'Leary, who's missing his All-American.
Yeah.
And had to work with a guy who's never played safety before and a guy that spent half the year playing wide receiver. That was his depth chart last night.
Absolutely.
And against one of the best receiving corps he's going to face all year. And they played great. Yeah. I mean, they played great. And so I was very pleased by that. Very pleased by that. I thought Prince Collie looked a lot more. He still has to, he's very inconsistent.
But he looks more comfortable.
He flashed a lot more than he did last week.
And when you feel more comfortable, you can flash your athletic ability. Yeah. Because when you're thinking too much and you're not comfortable, you hesitate, and that takes away from any kind of athletic ability that you have. And you're right. I think he played a little bit more loose than he did last night in a good way. Yeah,
Riley Mills played well, and I thought Nana had a really good game.
Like he was consistent,
not good from he didn't make a ton of plays.
He was consistent.
He was physical.
Yeah,
he was knocking guys off. He was getting his arm extended to keep him off his body. He was where he needed to be. They weren't able to out leverage him. I thought he played really good football. Really good football.
Yeah, look,
really good football.
The defense is ascending hard. Like this is a a championship caliber type defense ascending.
It's getting closer.
It's
getting closer.
Ascending to, and it's great to see.
They got to get their horses back. If they can play like this, Vince, when they get their horses back,
right,
then it'll be that.
Right. And that's fair.
Still don't think with the personnel they put on the field on Saturday that they could go stop in Ohio State.
Sure.
They got to get Kyle Hamilton back. They got to get Myron back.
The confidence is huge.
But
confidence is huge. Confidence is huge. I mean, because I agree with you that, man to man across the board, that they would struggle against Ohio State offense. I do agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
But confidence can erase some of that gap. Not all of it, but it can erase some of that gap. And I don't feel like this defense has played with the confidence that they've played with the last 2 weeks. And I think that does mean something. And so you're right. If they can get Kyle Hamilton back and Drew White healthy and, Myron healthy, that closes the gap even more, right? I mean, look, that's still going to be a huge task to go up against Ohio State if that happens to be who they play against. But confidence, man.
But you get Hamilton back, and it's a little different,
right?
And it's confidence in the man next to them, but it's also confidence in. I think they're finally buying into what Coach Freeman is asking them to do. I think that's a big part of it because he's very different than Clark Lee,
right?
And when you have the success you had under Clark Lee, I think there can be especially when it doesn't work early. And
Absolutely.
It didn't work early. It's like are you sure this is the right way to go?
Right. Because we had it going pretty well before.
Yeah. And there was a couple things that happened early in the year. For example, against Toledo or against Florida State on one of the long touchdown run. No, it was not that. It was the Toledo game on that long run, that 67-yard run.
Right.
Coach Freeman made the wrong call.
Right. And he owned up to it, though, which was huge.
Right. And I think, but that kind of thing can kind of shake your faith a little bit in a coach when you've had so much success. And that's the difficulty of replacing a coach who won. Yes. Like, it's one thing to replace a guy that got fired. It's another thing to replace a guy that just got promoted to being a head coach because of his success. And I think that what we're seeing now is the buy-in. Right. I think we're seeing the players are, hey, you know what, coach, you tell me what to do and I'm going to do it. And that's why you're starting to see better team defense. When one guy makes a mistake now, because mistakes happen to Georgia, mistakes happen to Bama and Ohio State.
Yeah, for
sure. The difference is when everybody understands their role within the defense, when one guy makes a mistake, that next guy is right there to hit it. So, like, if the defensive end misses a block or a gap, which we saw a couple times last night, what was happening against Florida State Toledo is the safety was getting there too late or was taking the wrong angle, and they were hitting big plays.
Right.
Last night, we didn't see that. And a perfect example is they ran a swing screen, which Virginia's pretty good at. And Houston Griffith comes flying up outside and forces the guy to cut back inside. Well, what happened, Bo Bauer makes the play. But if you go back, and I think this was the first quarter, Vince, if you go back and watch the play, I'm Bo Bauer, and I'm looking to the sideline. And I got the running back over here, and I got nothing over there. What was happening early in the year is they were going towards the running back. And so when he would cut back in, they would be getting there at the wrong angle, and they'd miss the block. They'd miss the tackle. Or the guy that was doing what Houston was supposed to do was not going outside. He was going towards the blocker, and then they were getting outside.
Just eating the block.
So two things have to happen. The alley player, which was Houston Griffith, has to stay at an outside angle to that guy. You cannot get beat outside. That is the worst thing you could possibly do. But then Bo Bauer, instead of working to the ball, starts working up the field. So he's now in position to either, when the guy cuts back, he's cutting right back into me, or if he beats Houston outside, I'm taking that upfield angle, I can recover and protect him. That's not what was happening early in the season. So it's everybody buying it instead of just, hey, I got to go get the ball. No, my job is to do this. And if the ball comes to me, I'm going to make the play. That was and it may not seem like much to y'all because it was about 4 or 5 yard gain. But to me, that was a 40-yard gain early in the season.
Right.
I'm being a bit hyperbolic, but you get the point behind it. And I think that is the big difference is he understands what his kids can do more now than he did early.
And that takes time.
They're trusting him now more and the staff more than they did the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
And I think it's paying off because yes, the last few teams they've played have been bad, but you know what the 3 of the last 4 teams that Notre Dame has played can do? They can score. North Carolina is the only one that scored on them, but North Carolina did not get to their season average.
Right.
The 4 best offenses Notre Dame has played this year are USC, North Carolina, and Cincinnati,
well,
and
Virginia. Yeah.
Virginia.
Yeah.
They held Virginia 36 points below their season average. Part of that was the quarterback being out, but
Granted.
still, you don't go from 39 to 3 because you don't
Right.
have your starting quarterback, right?
Right,
Especially when everybody
exactly.
else is there. They held Cincinnati to at the time was like 19 points below their season average. And what Cincinnati's season average is now is 39 points per game. So they held them 15 points below that. They held North Carolina below their season average, and it wasn't by much. It was like 3 or 4 points, but it was still below. And they held USC about 16, 17 points below their season scoring average. They held Navy to about 20 points below their season scoring average. So that's the thing I look for. And now for the first time all season, the Notre Dame defense is giving up under 20 points a game. Now the team is still at like 20.2. Let me look at it, Vince. The 20.5 is where the defense is right now, but that's 2 pick sixes.
Right.
And,
That's
and,
what
and
the
in no
team
universe,
is, yeah.
right. And in no
Right.
universe am I going to give
No.
blame the defense for the other team having a pick six. So you take those 13 points away because Virginia went for 2 on their pick six and didn't get it. And the defense is giving up 19.2 points per game. Okay, well, that's closer to where you want to be. Last year, they were at 19.7. 2019, 17.9. 2018, 18.2. And 2017, 21.5. So they're now in the window of what they've been the last 4 years.
Right.
Despite the fact, I would argue, that they've played better offenses this year than they played in 2019 and 2018.
Sure.
So we're starting to get there. They're starting to figure it out. And to me, that's the most encouraging thing is both offensively and defensively are starting to get there. And that's the takeaway. So I can be upset about how the game went down last night. And I am still ticked off because they should have won 42-3 or whatever. But you can then still take away from the fact that they are still headed in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point in time, you're running out of time to put it all together.
Yes.
And
agreed.
that's
You got
the thing.
2 games left.
Yeah, that's the thing.
We got a couple super chats I want to get to before we close up shop here for the night. Corey D says, Brian, last night you said something. It's so funny because we talked about this before we went on the air. Brian, last night you said something interesting about that the next coach at Notre Dame is on the current staff. I assume you're referring to Freeman. Are you hearing things, or is that a feeling that you have?
Well, we talked when he was hired that one of the things that we had heard was that there was discussion about potentially
succeeding
Brian Kelly.
Right.
It wasn't direct from what I understand, but I've also been told that Jack Swarbrick likes Marcus Freeman a lot, as do just about everybody else that's come across him.
Yeah.
So
very engaging gentleman. Yes.
So, and it's also part of it is also my opinion of the fact that I think if he stays for a couple more seasons, his recruiting, his attention to, because he's not your typical young coach in that he's a player's coach and like he's, dapping dudes up and I'm your buddy and we listen to the same music and let's hang out and I'm going to buy you guys beer. I'm being hyperbolic, but the notion of I'm your buddy. He can relate to them in ways. Yes, but he's kind of got that. Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it, Vince. Yeah. He's an old young coach.
Because look, and he's married with 6 kids. Like, kids make you grow up. Like, I'm just saying, kids make you grow up. And what is he, 33?
That would explain a lot about me, Vince.
Well, I don't have.
He's 35. I
mean, 35. Okay, I'm 35 years old with 6 kids, man. Like, again, that makes you grow up pretty fast. And I believe his oldest kid is a 8th grader.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of the family, and like it looks a lot like yours. Meaning the oldest is like 8th, 9th grade, and
right,
and then there's a bunch of young ones.
So I mean, just do the math, right? I mean, he had to grow up, and I think that parlays into the way he operates as a coach, right? He's not going to be that dap you up kind of guy. He's just an old young coach, and I love that,
holding people to a standard.
Yeah,
I think absolutely. He understands, and that comes from who he played for and who he coached for, was coached by.
Yeah.
It started when he played for Jim Tressel. It did. It just did.
Yeah.
And I think and he coached under Coach Tressel, I believe, for a year. I believe he
when he was
I
a grad
believe he started coaching. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I believe. Yeah. 2010. No. 2000. No. Yeah. That'd have been Coach Tressel's last year. Correct. Jim Tressel's last year was 2010, right?
You're asking me for confirmation. It's not coming from me.
Okay.
I don't remember, to be honest with you.
I think it was.
Yeah, that's the timeline sounds right.
Yeah, because I think Urban Meyer's first year was 2012.
Okay.
Yeah, so 2011 was the year Luke Fickell took over.
Okay.
So 2010 would have been Coach Tressel's last year.
Gotcha. Which would make sense.
Right. And so then, Luke Fickell was his position coach, and then Luke Fickell was his boss at Cincinnati for 4 years. And so,
yeah.
Yep.
No question. Okay.
I just love the fact that in his Wikipedia page, one of his titles is the Pangbaum Hall Flag Football Assistant Defensive Coordinator. Somebody went in and added that. That's really hilarious. That's one of the things on campus.
That's hilarious. Yeah. That is hilarious. Awesome. That's hilarious. And that's a girls' dorm, by the way.
Yes.
In case anybody doesn't know that.
That's hilarious. That's absolutely hilarious. That is awesome.
Another super chat we got here from Matt. Appreciate it, Matt. He says, O-line is playing better, but if we make the playoff, how confident are you guys that they can hold up against the other selected teams?
Pass protection, I'm more confident now than I was. Run game, I still have concerns.
Correct. I agree with that. But I will say that I'm more confident with the play calling, with this offensive line than I was earlier in the season as well, which I think helps. Yeah. But and it would take us a whole show to go through each team and talk about what Notre Dame could do against each team, and because I think it varies. But I think it would be interesting to see, and I'd love the opportunity. So
hey, I just went back to the top, and the first chat is still there.
Oh my gosh!
I think they have officially fixed.
They fixed the StreamYard, man.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Finally, after only a few emails from me.
Yes, about lots of complaining and whining from me.
Yes. That's fantastic.
Vince, let's wrap up. I wanted to talk about an article I wrote for Irish Breakdown tonight, and it was about the college football playoff.
Yes.
Because for the first time all year, I actually think Notre Dame has a legitimate shot at the playoff, which I didn't think I was going to have. But then I sat and looked at it, and I looked at what has happened and then what is in front of them that has to happen. There's no avoiding it. And so I wrote an article at irishbreakdown.com. I wanted to get your thoughts on it, and I wanted to kind of talk to, kind of put it out there and kind of look at kind of what happened this weekend. Oklahoma losing to Baylor was bigger than I thought it was going to be, because I think that if Notre Dame handles their business, meaning
wins out
and blows the next two teams out, because you need to. Like, listen, let me explain something to you, okay? Georgia Tech and Stanford are awful. They're both 3-7. Georgia Tech is in the process, or in the midst of a 1-5 stretch. They've given up 37.8 points per game during that stretch. Phil Jurkovic just went 13 of 20 for 310 yards and 2 touchdowns, rushed for 81 yards and 3 more touchdowns, and BC hung 41 up on Georgia Tech. BC's not an explosive, has not been a part of it's because they haven't had their quarterback all year, but now that he's back, they're still not a 41-point type of offense. Stanford has lost 5 in a row, and they've given up 33.8 during that stretch. You need to blow these teams out.
Yes.
You need to blow them out. That's step one. But then you look at it and you say, okay, let's just say Notre Dame just moves up 1 spot this week to number 8. That's it. May seem like it. So then there's 5 teams you got to leap in front of, right? 7, 6, 5. No, there's 4 now that you got to leap in front of. So you're at 8. So you leap 7. You got to leap 6. You leap 5, and you got to leap 4.
Right.
So you need to leap 4 teams in 2 weeks. Seems daunting, but then I looked at it and I said, well, three of the teams ahead of them are all Big Ten East teams that haven't played, and they've only played one game against each other.
Exactly.
So Ohio State plays Michigan State this week and Michigan the week after. If Ohio State wins out, that's 2 teams that are gone. If Ohio State gets beat by one of those 2 teams, then Ohio State's out.
Probably 3 teams gone. Yeah.
I think if Michigan beats Ohio State and wins the Big Ten title, they're absolutely in the college football playoff. And I would argue the same thing about Michigan State. If one of those 2 teams wins out, they will be in the playoff.
I agree.
That's what I think.
But the
But
committee clearly loves the Big Ten. They love a lot about what the Big Ten is. So
So
a
you have to
one-loss Big
assume
Ten
a big
champ
yes.
is
And
absolutely in.
and honestly should. In
Yeah,
this
I have no
season of
problem
college
with that.
football playoff, if one of those three teams goes 12-1, they should be in. No matter Notre Dame could win 80-0 the next 2 weeks, and that wouldn't
It would
change
not matter.
of them being ahead of Notre Dame because they would
Completely
have
agree.
a lot more high quality wins than what Notre Dame has.
Yeah, completely agree.
So you look at that and you say, okay, so that's two. There's guaranteed two Big Ten teams are going to fall behind Notre Dame.
Yes.
So
Just
now
because
you
they're
go
playing each other.
right now you go from worst case scenario, you go to 6.
Right.
So now you just have to pass 2 teams, and it's pretty easy. And the thing about it is 3 things can happen to get those 2, and that what adds to the. This is actually something that they have a chance at doing. It'd be one thing if it was 2 things got to happen, and if you don't get the inside straight, you're not going to the playoff.
Right.
That's not the case. And again, barring upsets, so barring Georgia losing to Georgia Tech and then getting beat by Bama, which is not going to happen, barring Bama losing to Auburn, barring Penn State beating Michigan State and then Michigan State beating Ohio State.
Right. They all just beat each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Michigan loses to Maryland, barring all that stuff, or Wisconsin beats the Big Ten. That's the other interesting thing that I'm not even going to get into yet.
Yeah.
If Wisconsin beats the East champ,
Whoever
I don't
happens
think it's
to
going
be.
to happen.
Yeah.
But so anyway, 3 things. One of 3 things needs to happen. Number 1, Cincinnati needs to lose. This is going to upset some people because of the head-to-head. The reality is the committee has made very clear that the head-to-head doesn't matter as much. They're going to look at the whole resume, and it's clear they don't like Cincinnati very much.
Very clear.
And Cincinnati has look outside of their win over Notre Dame. Cincinnati has not been an impressive football team this year. They really haven't. They've been a pretty good group of 5 team. Anyone that watched that game thinks that was Notre Dame played worth a darn that day. Just hasn't ever watched Notre Dame before. So a 12-1 Cincinnati with a loss to either SMU, East Carolina, or Houston has a chance of being leaped by Notre Dame should Notre Dame win out impressively. I think we could debate the merits of it, but it's the reality. I'm not giving you my opinion based on what I think should happen. I'm giving you my opinion based on what I think the committee is showing us.
The
this
committee
year
is looking for any possible way to not have Cincinnati in the Final Four. And if they're talking about Notre Dame versus Cincinnati, and they put the resumes next to each other and do all the things that they're going to do, they're going to take Notre Dame. They're going to take Notre Dame.
Unless Cincinnati just goes out there and steamrolls their next few opponents, which they have an opportunity to do. They play, because here's the thing. This is the best part of their schedule coming up, like the best stretch of games. Obviously, none of these teams are as good as Notre Dame, but they play 8-2 SMU, 6-4 ECU, and 9-1 Houston, which would be in the AAC championship game.
Right.
If they convincingly beat those teams, then I think the resume changes, and they're clearly in if they win those games. If they win out even ugly, they're going to be in. But I'm saying, like, let's say they get upset by SMU, by ECU by a field goal, and they pound SMU and pound Houston. Maybe then you could say they have a case. If they pound those teams and they win out, they're in. They deserve to be in over everybody not named Georgia.
Right.
At this point in time.
I agree.
Right?
And the committee will hate it.
They got to play better.
But exactly.
They got to play better. So that's, but in the way that they're playing with SMU, ECU, and Houston coming up, it's not given that they're gonna win out. So I think that them losing to one of those 3 teams would look a whole lot worse than Notre Dame losing to Cincinnati. And as I said, the committee's going to look at your entire resume. Fans obsess too much on what happened that one weekend. The reason that I thought that the Michigan State thing was stupid is because Michigan and Michigan State have almost identical resumes, other than the fact that Michigan State beat Michigan.
Exactly.
Cincinnati and Notre Dame would not have similar resumes if they lose to one of the 3 teams left on their schedule. Cincinnati would have a worse loss, and their one big win would be negated by the fact that Notre Dame has like 4 or 5 better wins than they do, especially with Wisconsin continuing to win. So that's one. Number 2 is, and I'm not even going to talk about chaos in the Big Ten. Number 2 is Oregon has to lose. And if you look at Oregon's schedule coming up, Vince, that's doable. They got to play. They're most likely going to have to play Utah twice. The only way that doesn't happen So Oregon plays Utah this weekend, and it's at Utah. Utah was playing pretty good football until they kind of sputtered their way through a 38-29 win over Arizona. That struck me as we're looking ahead to next week kind of game.
Right.
Because they were coming off of a 52-7 win over Stanford and a 44-24 win over UCLA. Utah is playing good football right now. I think they're capable of beating Oregon, and they get them at home, and then they play Colorado at home. If they get upset by Colorado, then they're not going to go, assuming Arizona State wins out. But right now, Utah has a 1-game advantage over Arizona State in the South. If Oregon beats Utah, then they would have the same record. But the problem for them is Utah has the head-to-head for Arizona State. Utah has the head-to-head. So that's what makes that one a little bit trickier. So Utah right now is 6-1 in the conference because 2 of Utah's losses were to BYU and San Diego State. They only have 1 conference loss, even though they're 7-3. Arizona State has 2 conference losses. So Utah would have to lose twice for Arizona State to get in, and Arizona State has to win out. So most likely, Oregon's going to have to play Utah twice. You and I both know it is hard to beat a good team twice.
Absolutely.
And then also Oregon has to play Oregon State at home. Now, again, that's a game they should win, but this
Correct.
is a good Oregon State team. They're not great, but they're good. They're 6-4. Jonathan Smith is a name that Notre Dame fans that are older than 25 should remember. Sadly, he was the quarterback for Oregon State when they beat Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl back with Ken Simonton and TJ Hushmanzada and Chad Johnson. He's done a really good job. He was the OC at Washington when they went to the playoff. I believe he was their OC that year. But he's been now, I think, 2nd or 3rd year at Oregon State. He's doing a really nice job. They're 6-4. They just came off of a beat down of Stanford. And, they've had a couple bad losses, but they also beat Utah. They beat Washington. They spanked USC at USC. So that it's doable that Oregon could lose. Now,
for sure.
Oregon can't – if Oregon wins ugly, they still belong in over Notre Dame. I don't care what Notre Dame does because there is nothing on Notre Dame's resume that comes close to competing with a road win over Ohio State.
Absolutely agree.
And they would be a conference champ. So they need Oregon to lose. And then the other one is they need Bama to lose. And Bama's got 2 games they might lose coming up. And that is Auburn, which I don't know how Auburn's going to handle what happened to them on Saturday. Did you see that, Vince?
I did not.
They were beating Mississippi State 28-3 and lost. Mississippi State at one point in time scored 33 straight points.
Wow.
Auburn ended up losing 43-34. So they got outscored 40-6 in the last 2.5 quarters. So Auburn has now dropped 2 games. That's a little, but it is troubling. It is at Auburn.
Right.
Alabama plays Arkansas this weekend. I don't think Arkansas has the firepower to hang with them. Right. And then they play at Auburn, and then they play Georgia in the SEC title game. So you need Alabama to lose
somewhere,
because I do think an 11-1 Notre Dame team gets in over an 11-2 Alabama team. Because everybody say, well, they got the extra data point. I'm sorry, Mercer does not count as a data point.
Exactly. Absolutely correct.
Doesn't.
And I realize that the committee is setting Alabama up to potentially be the first 2-loss team to get into the playoff. I get it, but I don't see that occurring. Not
over a 1-loss Notre Dame team.
Yeah, right.
I don't, because you say, well, they played in the SEC title game. I get that. First of all, a 2-loss Auburn team with their losses to Auburn, I don't care how they beat Georgia, they're not getting in.
Right.
Not with a loss to multiple 3-loss teams. You can't lose 2 games to 3-loss teams. The only thing is if they lose to Georgia in a competitive game. But even then, because I think that would be like, I do think the committee cares about perception and money and big names. That's why I think they would much rather have Notre Dame in than Cincinnati, because it is still this to the committee and the NCAA.
Yeah, for sure.
Although the NCAA doesn't have anything to do with the college football playoff, but to the committee and ESPN, it's still this. But when I look at it, I say, I think that they would understand that the backlash for putting Notre Dame in would be far less than the backlash for putting a 2-loss Alabama team that doesn't even win their conference.
Right.
Or beats Georgia with 1 loss. With 2 losses. I don't see that. I don't see them doing that over a 1-loss Notre Dame team. The only way Bama gets into me is if Bama's behind Notre Dame. Now, Bama could still get in, but they're not going to be over Notre Dame. Does that make sense? Like Bama could be the 4 seed and Notre Dame could be the 3, but they're not getting in. If Cincinnati loses twice, hypothetically, and it's
Oregon
Georgia, Georgia beats Auburn by a point, right? Ohio State wins out. If Cincinnati and Oregon lose, it's Notre Dame and Bama. But if Oregon wins out and Ohio State wins out and Cincinnati loses and Alabama loses the game, I could see a scenario in which Notre Dame is at 4 and Bama's out. I could. Don't lose that, because the 1 loss they have looks worse now because A&M just lost their 3rd game. That's what the committee was trying to do to Alabama. They were trying to pump A&M up, put them all up to number 11 to try to make that loss look better. Right. And then A&M went and got smacked this weekend by Ole Miss. So now they have 3 losses now. And so I think it's going to be a lot harder now for Bama to get in with 2 losses. And Auburn losing to Mississippi State hurt them too, because now Auburn won't be ranked as high as they were last week. So the cards, everything's kind of aligning a little bit for Notre Dame right now.
But again, they're not in complete control of their own destiny.
Not at all.
Things have to happen around
Not
them.
at all.
But
the odds are much greater now.
The odds of things happening are better than they were this time last week, right? I mean, that's I think that's the point that you're trying to make. Like, there is a path, and it's a clear path if certain things happen. I mean, again, the Big Ten's going to eat itself up. Potentially, all 3 of those teams could eat each other up, and they all drop behind Notre Dame. But at the very least, 2 will, right? And so that puts you at 6. And when you're at 6, you have a shot. Plain and simple. And like you said, with the way Cincinnati is
even if they're
the
not
weeks,
6 this weekend, to your point, they don't have to be 6 on Tuesday.
They don't have to be. They don't have to be. Right. They don't have to be. They have
That's
to be.
why the Oklahoma loss was, because if you'd added Oklahoma needs to lose into that data point, it's like, okay, now you need 3 out of 4. And just do the math, 75% compared to 67%. You know what I mean? Like, the odds just keep getting better. And then you look at the way certain teams are playing. They just need 2 out of 3 things to happen, and I think those things are doable. But Notre Dame's got to handle their business first, obviously. Yeah. But as I sat and looked at everything last night, and it was like 5:00 in the morning, because when I finally finished on my work, and I'm like, I wrote a note like playoff pathway, because I'm looking at it, I'm like, wow, this is actually something that could happen.
But you want to sleep on it and make sure that you're not seeing things at 5:00 in the morning.
Correct, because when the sun starts coming up, you're like, yeah, it's time to go to bed.
Yeah.
It was an interesting thing. And I see people saying, well, they're not ready to be. Look, I don't know how much college football you've watched this year, but there's nobody that scares me like Bama last year, or Clemson 2018, or LSU.
Or LSU 2019.
There's no team like that this year. Right. Ohio State maybe could get there, but again, their defense still sucks.
Their defense is not good. It's not good.
Yeah. But their offense is playing pretty good football right now.
And look, okay, people might take this the wrong way, but Georgia, their defense is unbewillible. Their defense is really, really good. But their offense, the way that Notre Dame's defense has played the last 2 weeks,
as long as Kyle Hamilton plays,
I'll
take my chances against them. Yeah,
absolutely. But roll the ball out.
You need Kyle Hamilton in the playoff to have a chance to play with those teams.
No question about it. Yeah. You need to be at full strength. I mean,
he'll be fresh.
Full. See, it's true.
He'll be fresh.
This is very true.
You need to be full strength of the guys who have a chance to be full strength.
Yeah.
Not like, you don't need Maris Luafau. Maris hasn't played all year.
Right. And Avery Davis isn't walking through that door. Like all of those different things, they're not happening. I'm talking about the people that are available. They need to be at full strength. Yes. No question.
Yep. So that's kind of my thing, Vince. We did have a super chat here. We had a big super chat I wanted to get to. Yeah.
Yep. No question.
From Dale Hatem.
Thank you, Dale. That's awesome, man. Really appreciate it. He says, I've been listening to you since last year's playoff game. Love your professionalism, effort, and dependability. You lift me up every day and are quality human beings. That last part is the most important to me personally. And I know Brian probably feels the same way, but thank you, Dale.
I don't get called a quality human being very often. So it's nice when it happens. I appreciate that very much, Dale.
No doubt about it, man.
Sorry, I had to make a joke because, it's a little too emotional sometimes in here, but I appreciate that very much, Dale. I do. I do.
Yeah,
I appreciate that you see that we attempt to be professional. It's something we take pride in, the effort,
Absolutely.
and we try our best to show up every day, right? And we can't always do it, right? Because
sometimes we can't answer the bell, as Brian Kelly would say.
We try to do it as much as possible, right?
Absolutely.
And we've raised everybody else's game up, and everybody else is trying to do daily shows and stuff like that, which is great because I think that's better for everybody, right? It just means more content for the Notre Dame community.
When you can raise the bar for everybody else, that's awesome. I love it. Yep.
Yeah. So, and just a couple things I want to respond to, Vince. If we can go through and find some of these questions, we can't get to all of them. We don't have the time. But here's one: Cincinnati has been mediocre since beating Notre Dame. I would contend that Cincinnati's been pretty mediocre all season. It's just Notre Dame played bad that day, really bad. I don't even think Cincinnati played great that day. Cincinnati played emotional that day. They were very well coached that day.
Mm-hmm.
They're not a great team, and Notre Dame made them look better. I didn't think they played that well against Indiana. They were tied 7-7 at halftime against Murray flipping State. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think Cincinnati's been that good all year. That's why after losing that game, I was so disgusted by it because I'm like, I've watched this team on film and I've watched them every weekend since then, and they're not a playoff team. This Cincinnati team is not a playoff team. I think last year's Cincinnati team was better than this year's Cincinnati team, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And
I mean, look, everybody's making fun of me because of my look on my face after the Cincinnati game, but there was a reason for that, right? It wasn't just because Notre Dame lost. It's because the manner in which it happened should not have happened.
They just were not a good team.
They were not. They were. Yeah, I completely agree with that.
I mean, Cincinnati last year was steamrolling people, and then they had to beat some good teams. You had to beat Tulsa, who was a good team last year. I mean, Tulsa had a first-round draft pick at linebacker. Their two starting corners are now starting in the SEC at corner. They had to beat UCF on the road. UCF was a better team last year than they are this year.
Oh, yeah.
And then, they battled Georgia. But, I mean, I think their closest game, the UCF game was the only regular season game that was less than 14 points.
Right.
Difference, and this year it's like, they're still having 10 to 14 to 17 wins, but they're just against really bad teams.
Right. Yep.
And
absolutely.
To me, that's the difference.
Caleb is making a prediction here.
Okay.
Gave us a super chat to do it. Thanks, Caleb. Appreciate that. He goes, Georgia, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Oklahoma State. My projection.
Now, that's one of the things I talked about in that article that we did not talk about during the show. And is the part of the reason that I look at last night's game and say they needed to put more on the board and why they have to blow out their next two teams. They can't just win uglies because of the team behind them.
Oklahoma State
whooped. I mean, again, Oklahoma State's one spot behind Notre Dame. That's it. The committee has shown they have no problem flipping teams that both win. No problem with that. And so if they're out there beating ranked top 15 Baylor one week, go out and beat ranked Oklahoma the next week, and then get a rematch with potentially Oklahoma or Baylor the next week, while Notre Dame's beating a bunch of 3-7 teams by 14 to 20, guess what? Oklahoma State will and should jump Notre Dame because they're going to have a better overall resume, and they're going to be pounding teams down the stretch. And so, yes, Notre Dame has to come out, and they have to convincingly beat people because, look, here's what Oklahoma State has done the last 3 weeks. They beat a bad Kansas team by 52. They beat a TCU team that has a losing record, right? But it's also a TCU team that beat Baylor. They beat them by 46. And then they beat West Virginia, who's 4-6, but an okay team. Beat Iowa State, beat TCU. They went on the road and beat them by 21. So their worst game is a 21-point road win over a decent team. Notre Dame has had 10-point win over a 5-5 North Carolina team, a 15-point win over a 4-5 USC team, right? That's why last night was an opportunity to really put some distance between yourself and Oklahoma State, and they missed out on that opportunity. And now Oklahoma State is going on the road to play Texas Tech this weekend. Well, because Texas Tech beat Iowa State this past weekend, they're 6-4. And then you play Oklahoma on the road in that last game. And then actually, I'm sorry. Let me see here. No, I'm reading the wrong team. Yeah, that's Texas Tech. So yeah, Oklahoma State plays, I believe it's at Oklahoma. No, it's home against Oklahoma. They're at Texas Tech and home against Oklahoma. So they're going to have a win over a top 15 team if they beat Oklahoma. And then I think at that point in time, they'd get a rematch with Baylor, assuming Baylor wins out. Because Baylor and Oklahoma would have the same number of conference losses, but Baylor would have the head-to-head. So, yeah, it's going to get real interesting. So you got to watch behind. You can't just focus so much on what's in front of you that you miss out on what the team behind you is doing. And that's where Notre Dame has to be really careful. And same with Wake Forest. I mean, to me, it's an outside shot that Wake Forest can do it. But look, like let's say Wake Forest goes out there this weekend and just pounds Clemson. Just pounds Clemson. Is it a, and then they go out and let me pull up Wake's schedule. So they just beat an NC State team that the committee likes. NC State was ranked, 17th this past week. Wake Forest just beat them. They play at Clemson, and then they're going to play at Boston College. Well, Boston College is 6-4 now and plays at home against Florida State this weekend. They haven't lost a game yet that Phil Dracovic started this year. All four of their losses came when Phil Dracovic was hurt. They won 51-0, 45-28, 17-3, and then 41-30 at Georgia Tech with Phil Dracovic in the quarterback. If they beat Florida State at home this weekend, Boston College is 7-4. And then they would have a shot against Pitt. I think Pitt has got the inside track now in the ACC Coastal, I believe. But if Virginia upsets them, then that would hurt. But if Pitt beats Virginia or Virginia loses to one of Pitt or Virginia Tech, then Pitt, I believe, would clinch the Coastal. Pitt's going to be top 25 if that happens.
Yeah.
So you're going to have a win over a ranked NC State team, a win over Clemson, and a win over a 7-4 BC team, and then a win over a ranked Pitt team. It's not a given that they might leap Notre Dame if Notre Dame sputters their way through a game against Georgia Tech and Stanford, who stink. And so that's where I say Notre Dame has to handle their business. Have to handle their business the next 2 weekends. That's ultimately priority numero uno. But yeah, Oklahoma State's an interesting one, Caleb. Very interesting.
Rob has an interesting question here. He said, would Blake Fisher play guard if he comes back for the playoffs? I don't think they ever benched Kane Madden. That's never going to happen. If it hasn't happened up to this point, it's never going to happen.
Yeah,
and I don't think they bench Andrew Kostovic. I think he's played pretty darn well from what he's been asked.
Well,
to
you'd have to say, who do you bench? Do you bench Josh Lugg? Not going to bench Josh Lugg.
Not going to.
Do you bench Joe Alt? I wouldn't bench Joe Alt. I mean, I think it's a fair question. Would Blake Fisher play guard? If you're asking from the standpoint of would Blake say no, I would hope not.
Right.
I really, really hope not. That would be a very immature decision, in my opinion. And I don't think that would be the case. Because I think the pitch that Notre Dame could give him is, hey, do you know who the highest paid offensive lineman, or, actually it'd be Zach Martin. Well, yeah, it's actually that point still matters.
So
you know who the two best offensive linemen we've produced the last 2 years? They were drafted high. They're making a ton of money. It's Quentin Nelson, who played guard, and Zach Martin, who played tackle but moved to guard in the NFL.
Right.
Guards make a lot more money in the NFL now than they used to.
Yep.
Quentin Nelson's going to have he's going to crush the record whenever it is.
Because he's still on his rookie record.
Yes.
Right? I mean, his rookie contract.
Oh, they're getting great value for Quentin Nelson right now. Great value. But I believe he's in year 4. So the odds are, because 18, 19, 20, 21, right? So he's in year 4.
Crazy.
That means this offseason, he's getting paid.
Yeah.
Don't think that Notre Dame's not going to be like, hey, Blake, come here real quick. That's how much Quentin Nelson just got paid. He played guard.
Right.
His
whole career at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Played guard.
You stack that up to the big salary that Ronnie Stanley got, and you're like, hey, guess who's making more money? It's the guard. Matter of fact, both guards, because Zach Martin broke the guard record a couple years ago.
Yeah.
It's since been passed, but he set the standard. And then another Notre Dame's guy is going to beat it. What? Play guard. So I would hope that they'd be willing to have that conversation.
Yeah. They
need to have that conversation, because I still believe there's a chance that to get the 5 best guys on the field next year, he has to move. Now, if they're ready to give up on Tosh Baker, then we don't have to have this conversation. You can just move Blake to right tackle, or you can have Joe Alt to right tackle.
Play right tackle. Right? Yeah, right.
And then Blake stays at left. And then you've got Kristofic and Rocco Spindler, and you've got Zeke Correll, and actually Zeke would be competing at center, but you'd have those guys. You'd have Caleb Johnson. You have Michael Carmody potentially battling at guard, You're bringing in Joey Tanona. I mean, you're bringing in some players that you say, okay, well, this is the way.
They've got options. They've got options on the O line.
Got to coach them up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got to coach them up. That's the big thing.
So specifically to this question, I don't know. I mean, it would be interesting to see what they would do. It would really be interesting if he's available, which is not a guarantee, obviously.
Right. And honestly, if he was cleared, I don't know if I would bring him back. Because he's a 330-pound kid, and it was a knee injury. And if your line's playing well going into the playoff, I think I would want to get him some practice just to have him in case of an emergency. But I don't know if I would just insert him into the lineup. Kids played a half a game.
Yeah, exactly.
Of college football.
Now there's a bunch of practices, obviously.
And I believe, but he missed a ton. I mean, he missed.
Right.
I mean, he's only practiced for 5 weeks.
Yeah, he's missed the whole season.
Right. And so to me, I don't know if I would just I would get him practice. He'd be my number 2 tackle, like my third tackle, I guess. And if somebody gets hurt or isn't playing well, I would strongly consider going to him. But I'm just not sure if I would start him if the line's playing well. Now, if one of the tackles is playing poorly and you still make the playoff, I'd maybe consider it. But it's not like Blake has a year under his belt where you know what he can do and he's healthy. And the other thing, too, is the bigger issue for me, though, is I don't know if I want to expose him to potential for being injured again. If your line's playing well, I don't know if how do I say this? A second knee injury as a freshman for a 330-pound kid could be really bad. And so it's a little different than the Kyle Hamilton situation because it was far more severe injury. And Blake is in the trash of knees getting hit all the time.
Sure.
And he's played a half of a college football game. I would err on the side of caution, even if he was cleared with Blake, because Blake, whether it's right tackle, left guard, right guard, center, don't care. Wherever you're going to play him, he has a chance to be special. And you don't want to not sabotage. That's the wrong word because that makes intentional. You don't want to burden that kid with 2 major lower body leg injuries before he's done with his first year.
Yeah, agreed.
If you can avoid it. And so I'd be very cautious. Very cautious with that.
Nolan Sanchez has a comment. He made this comment much earlier in the chat, but he's asked it again. So I'm going to put it up because I think it's an interesting take. Nolan says, it hurts to watch Cone in the game on 3rd downs and 4th downs. Buckner should be always on in those downs, in my opinion. There's no chance if I'm the offensive coordinator that I'm bringing in a different quarterback every time there's a 3rd down.
No, you can't. Plus, Jack Cone's been pretty freaking good on 3rd down in the last couple weeks. I think he was like 7 of 8 last week on 3rd down. He was, I think, 4 of 5 this week.
Right. So I really don't understand this comment.
And 3 of the 4 were completed. I think where I would say is there are certain circumstances where I would bring Tyler in a 3rd or 4th down in a 3rd and short, 4th and short. Like for me, 4th and 1.
I did not like the quarterback sneak. I didn't.
There's no.
I'll give you that.
There's no reason for him to be sneaking from 1.5 yards away.
Right.
And he's not that kind of player. I would either run your offense or I would have him. I would have a much Tyler better come in.
That if you run your offense, let him throw the ball, hand it off. A million different things you could do as opposed to a 1.5 yard quarterback sneak.
Right.
Because that's a long way to go for
a line that gets no movement.
Exactly.
And Jack's not a real big guy. He's like 215 pounds. He's not like Phil Dracovic or some of these bigger quarterbacks that are really good sneaking it. And it's like, and you don't have a line that gets a ton of movement. It made no sense to me. And you have arguably the best running back. Look, I would not trade Kyron Williams for anybody.
Agreed.
With all due respect to Kenneth Walker, you put Kyron Williams behind the Michigan State offensive line, and Kyron's numbers are stupid.
Yes, agreed.
I mean, just stupid. You put him in the Big 12 playing against Big 12 teams every week like Breece Hall, and his numbers are stupid. So, he doesn't have the sexiest numbers, but I'm not trading Kyron Williams for anybody.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why in that kind of a money situation you don't want to give the ball to your best football player. when you have a quarterback that's just not that big mover and you don't have a line. Because like Kyron has shown, like the line could get their butts whooped and he can still move the chains. I mean, he's been doing it all year. He did it multiple times on third down on Saturday. So yeah, I didn't like that. And I didn't like the fact they tried to go fast either.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I didn't like, because again, get lined up, make sure everybody knows who they're blocking, let them get low, because the whole line came off high. They were trying to speed up, and Jack rushed it and he kind of falls down. And you move it a half yard up, maybe it's a different story. But
I think he got a bad spot, but it still.
I still thought it was short.
It still wouldn't have been it would not have been a first down.
Yeah.
But I still think it was a bad spot. I think they
right.
But anyway,
so it just goes down to what you're trying to do. And then Nolan followed up where, at least in the red zone, I want Buckner. And I believe Buckner can make the same throws as Cone, but also provides the option if the play fails. I don't think he can make the same throws right now, because it's not just about the same. It's not just about the throws. It's about the read. If you don't take the first touchdown, for example, if you don't read that pre-snap read of I'm going to that matchup, and if you don't get that ball out as soon as Mayer makes his break and you throw it perfectly on the outside, it's not a touchdown. Well, Tyler's had a couple chances in plays like that, and he's always throwing the ball behind. You do that in that situation, it's 100 yards the other way.
Right.
Your margin for error is really thin down there. What we have said is, I have no problem putting Tyler Buckner in the red zone.
Me neither.
But the problem is, right now, they don't have faith in their offensive line to let you run it in. What I would say is, if you're going to go 12 or 13 personnel in the red zone, then you put Tyler Buckner in. If you're going to go 21 personnel or 11 personnel, like they did on Saturday, they went 21 personnel with Chris Tyree in the backfield and Kyron Williams out wide, then you need to have Jack Cone in the game. What we had a problem with was when they went red zone, 13 personnel, and left Jack Cone in the game. Right. That was silly. So there's certainly a role for Tyler Buckner. I just don't think you automatically have to take Jack Cone out. There's a lot of circumstances that say, well, it depends on what the context is. What are you trying to run? Right? What works against that team? And he read out both of his touchdowns. One was a pre-snap read, one was a post-snap read in the red zone. And those are the things you like to see, right? And I think what they're doing now works. I think you could probably play Tyler a little bit more. I think there would have been some times for that, but I look, Tyler Buckner's the future.
Yeah, no question. And you will never hear Brian and I not say that, right?
But Notre Dame still playing for the playoffs, and which means a championship.
You don't need to be making major changes.
You win now. Does that mean you don't play Tyler Buckner? Of course not. We've been advocating for playing Tyler Buckner all year. He's not ready yet to take over full time. He will be soon. And so we have to understand that and appreciate that his time is going to come, but this is still Jack Cone's team. And I realize that with some people, it doesn't matter what Jack Cone does. It's just never going to be good enough. The same people that always talk about Ian Book's winning percentage, I'm just saying Jack Cone's got a better winning percentage as a Notre Dame starting quarterback than Ian Book does.
Boom.
I wouldn't do all that. I mean, they're
dropping the mic. Boom.
No. But, because they could flip that back on me. Well, Ian Book had a thing, but you never appreciated Ian Book. Very true. If Phil Dracovic or if Tyler Buckner was in his second year at Notre Dame, like Ian Book, like Phil Dracovic was in 2019, we might be having a different conversation.
Right.
But he's not. He's not ready yet.
But he's getting valuable experience as a true freshman that's only going to benefit him in the future.
Because what you don't want to do is expose him to situations where he's not ready for, and then he loses his confidence.
Exactly. Could not agree more with that. Yes.
So anyway,
something along these lines. I'm going to throw it out here. DeBeasy says, will Notre Dame go to the transfer portal for a quarterback next season? I say negatory.
Well, there was another question about that just above that was along those same lines, Vince.
Was there?
Pull up.
Yeah, please do.
It was, let me find it here. Here we go. From 20, it looks like LJP. Are you guys confident with Buckner for next year, or should they consider the portal? Here's the thing. If it was only Buckner that I had confidence in, I'd say you look at the portal. Because, again, he's got the knee injury and all that. But
sure,
it's the confidence in him and Drew Pine.
Absolutely.
That makes me say the only way you look at the portal is if you're going to find a kid from a school that's like, hey, I want my master's degree. If I'm not starting, that's fine. I'm okay being number 2 or number 3. I just want to get my master's from, and that there are kids like that, right? You go get some Ivy League kid that, just wants to come and he's okay being a backup. He's just there to give you depth, right? Hey, look, we need somebody to be there in case we get there and all. Maybe it's a quarterback that wants to get into coaching. He's not going to be an NFL player. He's your emergency guy because you'll have Steve Angeli as well, which you don't want to turn to Steve Angeli next year. But to turn Steve Angeli, you'd have to have a lot of stuff go wrong, but we saw that this year. Buckner was hurt. Cohen was struggling. They had to go to number 3.
Right.
Well, so there's value to looking at the portal if it's that kind of kid. What I'm not doing is bringing in
Jack Cohn,
Spencer Rattler, or the only way I would look in the portal is if you think you found your next Joe Burrow.
Right.
But Joe Burrow wasn't Joe Burrow when he, when he left Ohio State.
He played his first year at LSU,
right. But he never started the game at Ohio State.
Right.
It was a different, you know what I mean? And he was just okay as a senior, and then he blew up. If Russell Wilson situation came along, Russell was a really good quarterback. It's just they were ready to move on to Mike Glennon, and they didn't like the fact that Russell was playing minor league baseball. Okay, if some coach wants to be as dumb as Tom O'Brien was and how he handled the Russell Wilson situation, hey, sorry, Tyler, but this kid's, it's Russell Wilson.
Right.
But I don't know who that guy's not out there.
Right. Exactly.
You know what I mean? And I really like what Tyler Buckner could potentially be, but I also think that Drew Pine is not going to go down without a fight. He's not. And Drew Pine's going to get, he's going to continue to get better too. So, and then Paul Keene says, how do you think Buckner will go from not being ready to play against the teams on Notre Dame's schedule to being ready to play at Ohio State? Because he's going to have 10 months to continue developing as a player.
And
he's going to have
this year of playing football.
Right.
He didn't play football the last 2 years.
Because I think this is a very fair question, Paul.
Yeah.
And I want to explain why I'm confident in it. Because, number one, he's still a freshman. This is his first semester of going through a season and going through class and being in practice every day. And his first time he's had to play in front of against this type of competition. He has not played football since the 2019 season. He's getting his feet wet, so to speak. So then you've got the next 2 weeks of practice still to go where he's going to continue learning and developing. The next 2 games of still getting experience. And I loved what they did. Like, part of my take the foot off the gas was not how they used Tyler Buckner in the second half, because they put him in with the starting offense. Totally fine with that, right? He's got to make sure that they execute that handoff and they don't fumble the ball there, right?
Absolutely.
But that's experience. That failure is going to be a positive because now he has something to learn.
Because it was him and Diggs too, right? It was 2 freshmen,
right? Yeah. So he's going to learn from that. Then he's going to have 15 practices to get ready for a bowl game. Hopefully, he'll then have another week of practice to get ready for the next bowl game, right? You all go where I'm going there. And then you've got January workouts, February workouts, March workouts, then spring ball starts. Then you have 15 practices of spring ball where he's going to get even more reps.
Absolutely.
But now in spring, he's not where he was last year, where he was still learning the playbook. I mean, he was swimming, as every freshman is during their first spring at quarterback. Correct.
Yeah.
He's going to have he's already going to have a full spring under his belt. He's going to have 2 winters under his belt, a full fall under his belt, go through spring ball. He's going to have a second full summer under his belt. So when he steps on the field against Ohio State, assuming he's able to beat out Drew Pine, he's going to have gotten way more snaps because he was not getting starter snaps in fall camp. Tyler Buckner was not in the competition to start a quarterback in fall camp.
Right.
And it was always about getting him ready for his niche role.
Correct.
Which is what we wanted. So that's one of the things I've liked about what the staff has done.
Yes, no question.
And so now, and that's the case in the spring. He was not getting starter snaps in the spring. He was getting, you're a first semester freshman who hasn't played football in 2 years snaps. So when you look at the totality of where he will be from a development standpoint by that first Saturday in September compared to where he is right now, it's light years.
Yes.
Light years. So I just, I like where he's at, and I understand why people want to use him. But as I've always said, just because you're in a situation now where I'm just curious which one of your kids is pulling on your headphones to make it go that way.
She's listening.
Just because he's not ready now, it's based on his experience level now. His experience level by the first week of August is going to be completely different. and he's going to be getting starter
Yeah,
snaps.
no
And that's
question.
the difference. So
Yep.
very good question, Paul.
It's an excellent
very
question.
good question.
It's an excellent
And I'm
question.
glad you asked it because I
Yeah.
think you're not the only one with that question.
Yeah.
And that's all part of the development that guys go through.
No question.
So, yep. Yes, I'm pretty confident that Drew Pine will be on the team in 2021.
Yep, me too.
Definite no on JT Daniels. Definite no on that. Here's a couple more we'll just get through. Mason Crouch, let's say hypothetically that Notre Dame does make the playoffs. Do you think they even have a shot at winning a natty, especially if you are a 4 seed having to play Georgia? Yes, I think they have. Look, would I bet on Notre Dame? No. Would I predict them to get blown out like they have in the past? No. Would depend on what the draw is, but do I think this Notre Dame team, if they play to their potential, can play and on any given Saturday beat some of the other teams? Yes. Yeah. No matter what Notre Dame did in 2019, the only way they had any chance at LSU in 2019 was to play the perfect game, and LSU has to turn it over a bunch. That was a special team. There is no LSU this year. Last year's Notre Dame team had to play the perfect game and force turnovers to be able to beat Bama. There is no Bama of 2020 in this year. There just isn't. And so, yes, can Notre Dame beat anyone that would also be in the college football playoff? Yes. Could Notre Dame lose to all those teams? Yes. That's why I say this is the year. Just give yourself a chance, man. Give yourself a chance, because I would love to see this team with the offense continue to hit stride, the defense finally getting healthy.
Yeah. And
then you've got a month to prepare. And, yes. Because Marcus Freeman's not going to do what some pass coordinators did going in the postseason, which is just, hey, this is what we do. And
I also don't think Tommy Rees is going to be that way either.
Oh, yes, exactly.
I really do feel he will use the time
because he has weapons this year. Stuff. Like, I hated this game plan against Alabama last year. Hated it. It was disgusting.
Yeah, me too.
But there was things he could have done differently, but he didn't have the weapons he has this year. That's what makes me so mad about, they lost. They have way more weapons this year than they did last year.
And he's proven that he's willing to make changes offensively. We've seen it, and we saw it in the first half yesterday. So that makes me confident that would be the case. So
last time Notre Dame did some self-scouting, they went from what we saw leading up to the bye, which was to what we've seen the last few weeks. And part of it's they're playing bad defenses, but it's also schematically I can point to things and say they are better at this now. They're doing this better. You give them a month, and I think it's going to be a very similar story.
Agreed.
Hey, there's some things we gotta adjust and fix and get better at, and that's what makes me think they'd have a shot. Would I predict them to beat Georgia? No, I would not predict them to beat Georgia.
It's crazy.
Do I think they have a chance to beat Georgia? Yes. On any given Saturday, yes, they could beat Georgia, because this is not vintage Georgia.
Right.
It's not. So anyway, I think that's it, Vince. I think that's going to be it for tonight. I want to thank everybody for being a part of the show tonight. This is a lot of fun. We will be back tomorrow at 12:30. We'll talk about Brian Kelly's press conference, and we'll further this conversation that we're having now. There's a couple games I want to talk about. I want to talk about what the heck happened to Florida this weekend. Good Lord. And a couple other games I want to discuss with you. Tuesday, we will have our intro to Notre Dame against Georgia Tech. Wednesday, we are doing our fundraiser. So make sure you're there with us at 12:30 on Wednesday, where all the super chats that you give, and it will go to, we're going to help some local charities that are to put on, make sure that people can have as great a Thanksgivings as we have because of the blessings that we've been given. So we will definitely do that. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, check out the message board. We had a great week of signups last week. I want another even better week. So we had somebody sign up for the gold booster club. They joined the gold club for the booster club today, which I was super pumped about. You can join that, and I'm going to put the link in here at the bottom of the page if you want to sign up for the message board. We've got some great conversation going on, so come check that out. And I think you'll definitely enjoy it. But and then, of course, Thursday we'll get back on schedule. We'll have our matchup of the Notre Dame defense against the Georgia Tech offense. Then on Friday we will have our game predictions.
Yes, so one day late because we're just flip-flop,
bumping everything back a little bit,
moving things around a little bit.
Going to be a lot of fun this week. Check out the message board. Check out the website. Give us a 5-star review if you're listening via podcast. And otherwise, we will see you tomorrow, 12:30 sharp. Be there,
baby.